Hey everyone, I'm Kelsey Johnson and I am focusing on research discipline of communications today. So let's go through this. Okay, so a little bit of history of our program with communications. So it first started as elocution, which is the skill of clear and expressive speech. It's the belief that a person can be an effective communicator if they know how to speak well. Um, Eventually, communications found itself as a subgroup of English underneath the National Council of Teachers of English. And in 1914, they broke off and became the National Association of Academic Teachers of Public Speaking, which eventually became known as the Speech Communication Association. And I think now it's the National Communication Association. Um, the secondary and collegiate levels already had public speaking departments, and that led to this guy O'Neill doing some questioning and some surveying of people to maybe break off from the NCTE, but still figure out how to work with them. And O'Neill, once they eventually got separated from the NCTE, he became the first president of the NAATPS, and his number one goal was for the encouragement of research. So they needed a way to legitimize communication studies, and at the time, elocution was considered cosmetic and devoid of any substance. And they believed that if academic research, or excuse me, if academic speech was to live on, we needed to move away from elocution because people didn't believe elocution was that important anymore. So we became research focused universities. And a lot of this is happening in the Midwest or the Western middle area of America. And they started to begin seeing themselves as research universities. And they took on what became known as the Johns Hopkins model, which was based off of the German universities. And we see this in those Midwestern states, University of Chicago, Stanford, Duke, Cornell, Rice, but not necessarily the Ivy League colleges that we know today. So they firmly believed that if communications was to be taken seriously, we have to be capable of doing our own research because that's what the German universities were doing and they needed to legitimize themselves. So how do we do that? We've never been a research based um, program before. So numerous issues were coming up that people were struggling with. So, first off, we're teachers of public speaking. We're not researchers. How do we do this? Our history tells us that we're not ready to do research. And oh, yeah, we're a performance field. We don't have any theoretical background yet. So the solution that they came up with was to steal methodologies from similar disciplines like physiology, psychology, and sociology. But then more issues came up. But what do we research? How do we research is more important than what do we research. So they figured out that communications or speech was adaptive. They learned on the fly basically rather than dependent or derivative of other programs. So they came up with some solutions. And they decided, well, we don't know what we're doing, so let's throw some ideas at people and put it in the quarterly journal. So they listed a bunch of possible topic ideas because they were so um, hungry for ideas, and just to get any research was good research. And they created a bibliography that broke down the subfields of speech, and they were practical in nature because there wasn't really any theory yet to work on. And if you look at the list of the bibliography that was created, it was a lot of empirical evidence. Um, a lot of the ideas use the term like determine or effects, which seems very quantitative in nature in those early years of trying to figure out who we are as a department. And then they finally figured out, well, communications is scientific. So this guy named Hunt from South Dakota, he's very humanistic in nature. And he believed that speech was still very performance based. But then this guy, Wolbert, comes around and he is scientific in nature. And he's one of the first people in the field with a PhD. And he said he believed in speech science. And the reason that we can break communications off into its own thing and get away from English is because English is over here in the past and speech is in the present. And he figured out ways that we can become more scientific in nature with these subtopics that you see on the screen. So a lot of physiology still, physics, psychology, things like that, which eventually became a graduate program at the University of Wisconsin. And they believe that you can still be humanistic in nature and communications, but you can also be scientific in nature. So we have this kind of dichotomy of what we are in communications. And that's really kind of how our program that we're studying at Mankato right now has turned from elocution into a research-based field. Thank you.